Hi everyone. So we are going to go run through a timeline of the things that have happened in Chronicle of a Death Foretold, starting from the very beginning and moving all the way through page 80. All right, do it quickly. Gonna go fast, so sort of like a quick review. This review is also going to specifically include the things that happened from page 72 to 80, which is what you were supposed to read. So you're going to have some questions at the end regarding that. All right. So before everything started, when Santiago was younger, we need to know that Santiago had a thing for Maria Alejandra Cervantes, which is the town whore. His dad didn't like that, and so locked him up for like a year, told him to get over it. There's a whole situation on page 67 about a falcon and a crane, and that's something that you should probably really revisit and think about. Who's the falcon? Who's the crane? Who's the falcon? Who's the crane? This could change based on based on the perspective you choose to look at, okay? But when we're talking about Maria and Santiago, Maria is the crane, Santiago is the falcon, and he's going to get hurt because he can never actually have her, right? Because of what her profession is. So then we know this about his past. We also know about his parents, which we've talked about extensively. So Bayardo comes to town. Seems amazing. He bewitches everyone in town with his talents. He seems to be able to do everything. He's taking a nap one day, sees Angela. He's like, I want to marry that girl. He buys all the ticket to the raffle the next day. He wins this music box. He gives it to Angela. Angela's brothers are like, oh, you can't keep this. This is against your honor. So they try to return the music box, but they end up liking him and they bring him home. So it's at that time that it's determined that she is going to marry Bayardo. She tries to tell her mom that she doesn't love him, but her mom says, hey, you can learn to love him. Too bad. Angela is asked which house she likes best. She identifies Widower Zeus's house. Bayardo buys the Widower Zeus's house. Widower Zeus dies of a broken heart just a few days later. The plans for this wedding are absolutely amazing. The entire town is being restructured to accommodate this wedding because it is that amazing. Angela, in the meantime, is considering suicide. She's considering telling her mom what's going on because she knows she's not a virgin, and she knows that this is going to be a big issue once this wedding occurs. She doesn't kill herself. She does not tell her mom, but she does tell two of her friends. And her two friends convince her that, lots of people lose their virginity without really losing their virginity when they're younger, and that there is a way to fake this. So they give her a way to fake it. We haven't heard what that way is just yet. Santiago, well, we talk about a little bit about him. He's interested in the cost of this wedding, guys. Totally, that's all he's doing. He's adding stuff up. He is amazed by what Bayardo is putting on here. Bayardo does want to postpone the wedding by one day so that the bishop can marry them. Angela's like, I don't think so. I don't like the bishop. He only takes the combs from the roosters for his soup. He's a wasteful guy. He's not very considerate, so no. Bayardo is 2 hours late for the wedding. He's 2 hours late. Angela refuses to get dressed until he shows up. But when he does show up, she does get dressed. She wears all those purity things, all of the orange blossoms and the white and the veil and everything else for the wedding. Santiago, during the whole day of the wedding, does not appear to have any bad or awkward feelings about anything, right? Leading us to believe that he has never done anything with Angela in the past. Not really sure. People party big time. This is the biggest party this town has ever had. Bayardo's dancing, they're all drinking, and he says, I'm going off with my wife now. You guys keep on dancing and have fun. He takes his wife off to their new house. Santiago, the Vicarios, and the others are drinking at Maria Cervantes' house. They're partying over at her place. In the meantime, Bayardo is at the house. Somehow he finds out his wife is not a virgin, and he returns her very gently to the house. In the meantime, Santiago goes with some other guys and sings underneath their window. As if they're there, he's serenading the newlyweds, even though the newlyweds aren't really in there anymore. Angela's mom proceeds to beat her pretty heavily, right? Beats her up. Santiago, in the meantime, goes home. He wants to sleep for an hour. He wakes up around 5:30. During that time, Pedro and Pablo find out what has happened with their sister and decide that they're going to kill Santiago. She provides his name, and they're like, yep, we're going to kill him. Pedro's the one who makes this initial decision. You made a T chart of this in your book somewhere. Pedro and Pablo tell everyone they see that they're going to kill Santiago. Santiago wakes up the next morning after the wedding, tells his dream to his mom. No one sees anything bad, takes an aspirin, has his coffee, goes out to see the bishop. He does have a little scuffle with Victoria and Davina. He's grabbing Davina. Victoria's kind of nasty to him. They're throwing the guts on the ground. Remember that from the beginning. Pedro and Pablo go sharpen their knives. They tell Faustino Santos their plans. He is the butcher. He tells the police. Clotilde Armenta, she sends a beggar to tell Victoria to warn Santiago. Someone slips a note under Santiago's door. No one sees this. Davina leaves the front door unbarred. Look at all of these things that are happening to try to stop this murder from happening. Yet it happens anyway, right? Clotilde Armenta tells everybody that she sees to warn Santiago. Officer Leandro Pornoy, he even talks with Pedro and Pablo. Then he tells the mayor, the Colonel Lorenzo Aponte, about Pedro and Pablo. The colonel hears about the return of Angela the night before, starts to put things together, and is like, all right, maybe I should go and talk to them. So he does. He goes to the milk store. He talks to Pedro and Pablo, takes their knives away, believes that he is the savior. He has stopped this murder from happening. But he didn't. Pedro believes that their duty is done since the knives have been taken away, but Pablo insists that they continue to do it. So they go back to get the knives. They continue to tell people what they're doing. They sharpen their knives a second time. Bishop shows up in the meantime, doesn't get off the boat. That goes on. Father Amador, he knows what's going on because Clotilde has sent him a message. He just passes by because he didn't know what to do. As the boys are headed back to the milk stand with their newly sharpened knives, Hortensia Balte sees the brothers walking, thinks they've already killed Santiago because she can actually see blood on the knives. It really hasn't happened yet. The boys do stop at Prudencia Cotez's house, which is Pablo's fiancée. She agrees with the honor killing when they stop in and have coffee. She says she wouldn't have married him if they hadn't done it. Santiago goes out the front door. He's supposed to have breakfast with Margot. Pedro and Pablo kill Santiago with their knives. Some other stuff happens here, but we haven't gotten to that yet. Pedro and Pablo kill them. They run to the church to surrender. They say they are innocent because it was all about honor. The body is on display in the living room of his own house, Santiago's house. While his body is laying there, his guts are kind of falling out. There's blood everywhere. Everyone in town is coming by to see this body. The dogs are there. The dogs are trying to eat his gut. Davina is crying hysterically. She's trying to beat the dogs off with a stick. Finally, the mother orders the dogs to be locked up. When they escape, she orders them to be killed. Orders are carried out. The body starts to decay. We start to see that this purple mass is moving over his face. It's getting kind of nasty. Father Amador has to perform the autopsy himself because, remember, the doctor is out of town. So because the doctor's out of town, they have to find somebody else to do it. At first, they want Cristo Beota to do it, but he's friends with Santiago, so he gets out of it. Father Amador, who's never performed an autopsy before, is going to perform this autopsy. It was sort of like killing him again. It was described as a massacre, and it happened at the public school, so not even in any other kind of place. It happened at the school. They used craftsman tools, which really mess up the body even more. These are not the tools you're supposed to use. They did decide that there were 7 fatal wounds. They were described as a stigmata of Christ, which further emphasizes this idea that Santiago is innocent because, remember, Christ would have been an innocent person. So further describes him as innocent. The medal of gold was found in Santiago's stomach during this autopsy, something he swallowed when he was 4. There were claims that he was going to die of hepatitis anyway. The doctor comes back and disagrees and is like, that's absolutely crazy because I was his doctor and he did not have hepatitis. I totally cured that. The body is absolutely unrecognizable after what they do. This was such a horrific autopsy that the Colonel Lorenzo Aponte becomes a vegetarian and a spiritualist after all of this happened. He can no longer eat meat. Maria Angelaria Cervantes, she engaged in disproportionate eating to mourn. The narrator has this really strange dream, and then there's this discussion of the smell. There's smell all over the place. Everybody can smell Santiago. Maria Cervantes goes away from our narrator because she says, you smell like him. He smells it. Pedro and Pablo, they smell him. The smell is all over the town. The smell, what could it symbolize? What could it symbolize? Probably guilt, right? Guilt of the town. Who's guilty? Pedro and Pablo are guilty because they killed him. Angela, she's guilty because she named him. The whole town is guilty because nobody stopped this murder from happening, right? In the town jail, at first Pedro and Pablo were comforted by the honor of doing their duty, and the smell starts happening, and they're really starting to struggle with it. Along with the smell, Pedro is struggling with his illnesses. They're kind of overwhelming him, and he can't eat. He's been awake for 11 months now. Pablo, he suffers from extreme diarrhea. This all starts at the exact same time as the autopsy is happening downtown. This is a great example of causality as subjective. First, they believe that Pablo's been poisoned by some of the Arabs, but then they dismiss it when they find out his mother's the only person that's brought him stuff to eat. Pedro and Pablo are transferred to the Panoptic prison in Rio Hacha. They await their trial for 3 years because they cannot postpone. That is how far that you have read so far in this book. So let's talk about some of the things you were supposed to find in your book, right? You had several words that you were supposed to define, so let's hope that you did that. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words you should have defined in your book, going pages 72 to 80. After reading pages 72 and 73, you were supposed to refer back to page 10, make a connection with the dogs at the bottom. What is it with these dogs, right? Dogs are always barking. They're always crazy. They seem to want his guts, to eat the guts. They're trying to get the guts of the rabbit at the beginning. They're trying to get his guts now. We have to get rid of the dogs, right? You were supposed to find the mood on page 73. Remember, the mood is how you feel. How do you feel? And you were supposed to circle words that contribute to that mood on page 73. On the top of 74, you had to explain what you think the dogs could symbolize. Try looking that up. Google it, right? Google it. What do dogs symbolize, and how does that match up to what's going on here in this story? On the top of page 75, you were supposed to explain how the autopsy came about and the troubles that were encountered, why it was described as a massacre. So we just went over that, right? Who was supposed to do it at first, and how did he get out of it? Who did do the autopsy? Why is it a bad thing that that guy did the autopsy? What tools did he use for the autopsy? Why was it called a massacre? What did they do to this body, right? On page 76, you were supposed to underline the statement that was the cause of death. So we learned on page 75 that there were 7 fatal wounds. Page 76 narrows that down for us. Make sure you find that and underline it. And then on pages 76 and 77, how did Colonel Aponte, Maria, and the narrator cope with the autopsy and the death of Santiago? We specifically talked about the Colonel and Maria. Find how the narrator coped with that. Okay, what did he do? And then talk to me about the smell. On page 78, what does the smell symbolize? We went over it. I talked about it. So if you missed that, you'll want to go back and check it out.